You are listening to By the Book, because if you don't look at the world through the Bible, you will never see it right.
Welcome to By the Book. This is Alan Griffith, your host for episode 178. In our last episode, we began to talk about parenting. And I don't know where you are in that whole realm. You may be a parent, you may not be. You may have had children who are already grown up. You may have children at home. You may not have children. Maybe you don't want to have children. Maybe you wish you did, but you don't. But I want to talk about the topic. It needs attention desperately in our day, and so we have to address it. And if you are not parenting, then I hope maybe you'll challenge somebody else to listen to these things who is parenting, because we must not lose our children, and we're losing too many. Too many children are growing up in Christian homes, and when they get the opportunity to make their own decisions, they walk away. They walk away from the local church. Sometimes they end up in a bad church. Sometimes they end up in no church. Sometimes they go fully into the ways of the world. They end up in sin. They end up in compromise. They end up in perversion. And I want to say again, and I say it kindly, it does not have to happen. I believe that with all my heart. And so I'm glad you're listening to this episode. Again, this is our second episode on parenting. And I hope it can be an encouragement to you. And if by chance, and this is not unusual, if by chance your children grew up in your home and they walked away, they went the wrong direction, you may very well have the opportunity of trying to get things fixed, because you might be able to identify the areas where you failed. You can see the areas where things went wrong. And you can go back to your child and say, I want you to know, I know we didn't do it right, or I know this particular thing was wrong, whatever it might be. I can remember preaching at a church, and it was a very special set of meetings, I confess to you. But at the end of one of the sessions, I gave an invitation with regard to parenting and with regard to things not being right between children and their folks and so on. And after I gave the invitation, and it was an invitation dealing with bitterness and hurt, and after I gave the invitation verbally, then we opened it up for people to respond. And I saw two people respond. One was coming down from what would have been my right and the outside aisle. One was coming down from the left side, outside aisle. And they came down and they got to the front and turned to kind of start walking in my direction. And with that, they saw each other and went to one another and embraced and cried. And I didn't know what was happening, but it turned out it was a father and his daughter who had been separated from one another, and I'm not sure how far back that separation went. But there they both responded, and I'll tell you, it was something to behold. And again, I didn't realize exactly what was happening when it transpired, because I'm just there waiting for people to come forward. But I saw them, and then afterwards we got the story. Well, I want to tell you, things might not be right with you and your children, but by God's grace, things can be fixed. There can be forgiveness. And if that's needed, then I pray the Lord will bring it to pass. But right now we're talking about the parenting side, and we're focusing, of course, on when the children are small. They're born into our family. And last time I read what I had written a number of years ago as a parent's covenant. And it presents great challenge, but it was also written with the idea of great hope. It was a commitment. It was a commitment that I was making in my own life, and a commitment that I was trying to extend to other parents. But I want you to know again that when we see children go the wrong direction, it did not have to happen. Now, last time we ended with quoting Proverbs 22:6, and I want to quote that to you. Again, at this point, we're not going to get into the depths of that verse, but we're going to come back to it. But I want you to listen to it. Here's what the writer said. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, I just want to say at this point, that verse is not a threat. That verse is filled with hope. The verse lets us know very clearly, however, that children must be trained. And I wish I could get people to understand that. Many people just don't seem to get it. But we're going to come back and talk about that incredible and wonderful verse. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Isn't that our desire? Isn't that what parents would want? That our children will grow up and they'll walk with the Lord, and they will walk with the Lord for the rest of their life. Can that happen? Yes, it can. Now let me move to a few other verses just to illustrate the idea of both parental responsibility and parental hope. And then we're going to talk some more about what our commitments need to be in the parenting process. But here's a verse that I've always found very interesting and challenging. It's from 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 4. Paul is writing about the qualifications that must be met by a man who would be a pastor. Now think about that. Here's what it says. The man must be, now I quote, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. Now, that's a qualification for a man in the ministry. I think every man should fulfill that responsibility that is assigned here to the man who would be a pastor. But it is specifically given by Paul, and in essence saying this: if a man doesn't have this right, then he cannot be a pastor. So what is this man supposed to do? Well, he is supposed to rule well his own house. The term rule there is not, harsh and heavy rule. It's not that at all. It's a term from the original language that means one who is set before others. He's set before them really as a leader, as an example to be followed. That's the idea. So there is certainly, discipline and such that would be involved somewhere along the line, but the ruling of the house is this: here's a man that's worthy to be followed. And then if we went on in the scripture, it would say basically, how can a man lead a church if he can't lead his own family? And so that's a powerful statement for one who would be in the ministry. But then the verse goes on here at the end of verse 4. It says this: having his children in subjection with all gravity. Now, I suggest to you that in itself creates responsibility for that man. This is not something that just happens. Oh, look, he lucked out, and his children are in subjection and with all gravity. Wow, what a lucky guy. I guess he can be a pastor. No, there's responsibility here. A man who would be a pastor, and again, I would go on and say every man, any man, is supposed to have his children in subjection. That means they are supposed to be under control. They are disciplined. They are doing what is right. They are not doing what is wrong. Now, that's responsibility assigned to the man. And then, and this is an amazing qualifier of this thing, where the verse ends with this statement, with all gravity. What's that mean? Well, the term gravity suggests respect and reverence. In other words, you know of some men, I know of some parents, and some men particularly, who have their children in subjection, but those children are scared to death to do the wrong thing. They're punished severely if they do the wrong thing. And so, they can sit still because of the fear of what's going to happen to them if they don't. But with all gravity means reverence and respect. And this has to be the ultimate goal of parenting. This is what we desire, and this is what we should seek to accomplish. That my children are in subjection, they are under control, they are doing what is right because they respect and have appropriate reverence for their dad. It isn't out of fear, although there's a place for discipline in training, and we're going to talk more about that. But it isn't because of the fear that they're in subjection. It's because they respect their dad. And it's that respect that causes them then to follow his leadership. I want to be like my dad. What a great statement that sometimes children will make. But I bring that verse up because we're talking about, obviously, parental responsibility in the rearing and training of children. And so people have to accept responsibility. Dads have to accept responsibility to do it well, to rule well, to set the right example, to develop the reverence and respect from your children, not terrified because of your temper. Now, couple of verses, very interesting from the Old Testament, I think, play into this whole concept of parenting. We would go all the way back to 1 Kings chapter 1 and verse 5. David is the king of Israel, and he has a son named Adonijah. And in verse 5 of 1 Kings 1, we read this. Adonijah exalted himself, saying, I will be king. Now that's a pretty bold statement. Notice he was not being prepped to be king. He was just making a determination. He exalted himself. And he makes this statement, I'm going to be the king. Why would this young man think that he could make such a declaration and all of a sudden establish himself as the king of the nation when his father was the king? Well, verse 6 of 1 Kings 1 gives us a commentary on David. Now, David was a great servant of God. He got into trouble. He got into sin. We know that. But he never turned to idolatry. He had a heart for God in spite of the sinful failures. But it says this about his parenting in this verse. What kind of a parent was David? Well, 1 Kings 1:6, right after it says Adonijah exalted himself, saying, I will be king. The next verse says, and his father, Adonijah's father, David, had not displeased him at any time, saying, why hast thou done so? Now, that is not a commentary on Adonijah's statement that he's going to be king. This is a commentary on Adonijah growing up under David, his father. And in that growing up experience, amazingly, it says that Adonijah's father, David, had never displeased Adonijah, saying at any time this, why hast thou done so? What's that mean? Well, it means that David was an extremely permissive father. I'm sure he was a busy man. He gave attention to the kingdom. He did a lot of things in life, to be sure. But here with this son, at least, he evidently never disciplined him. He never called the boy's actions into question. He never said to the boy when the boy did wrong, why did you do that? And by the way, that can be a dangerous question because kids will always have an excuse for why they did it. But the point of this text is David did not do the job as a father. And he ended up being so permissive that his son got to adulthood and thought, hey, I've always been able to do whatever I want to do. My dad's never stopped me. And for whatever reason, Adonijah had no respect for David, and he said, I'm going to be the king. Well, that didn't happen, but you can see the commentary on David's parenting. Now, contrast that with another passage, Genesis chapter 18 and verse 19, where the Lord is on his way to Sodom for the purpose of judgment. He stops and has conversation with Abraham. And he portrays it as a debate. Shall I tell Abraham what I'm going to do? And then here are the words of God. This is the testimony of God about Abraham as a father. This is what God says about Abraham. Listen to it. Genesis 18 and verse 19. For I know him. Boy, does God know us. I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him. Now there is authority, there is instruction. God says, I know that this man, Abraham, is going to command his children. He's going to rule the house. He's going to command his children. Now listen to what it goes on to say. This is very, very powerful. He will command his children and his household after him. After him. Sometimes you hear about fathers who say, you do what I say, don't worry about what I do. Here was what Abraham said as a father. He said, I am going to command you. I'm going to rule this house. I'm going to run this house. He said, but I want you to live the way I live. He commanded his children and his household after him. He's saying, follow me, follow my life, follow my testimony. Listen, that should be what fathers say to their children. I want you to serve God the way I serve God. I want you to live for God the way I live for God. I want you to pray the way I pray. I want you to worship the way I worship. Abraham wasn't telling his children to do things that he himself did not do. That's a powerful testimony. Now, we know this, be it David, be it Abraham, be it anybody, there are no perfect parents. No perfect parents, to be sure. No perfect children, to be sure. But we are getting some insight from these passages of Scripture talking about parenting. And we're going to see more of it. But what a great testimony by God about Abraham. He will command his children and his household after him. You can't get better parenting than that. Son, daughter, I want you to live the way I live. I want you to walk with God as I do. I want you to serve God as I do. Boy, that's something. I can remember one time at church when I was pastoring, I saw a strange thing happen. I saw a car pull into the parking lot, and the parents were in the front seat, and the children were in the back seat, and the car pulls up and stops, and the children get out, and they head into the buildings, and the parents drove away. And when I saw it, I thought, boy, I wonder what's going on now. I hope there's not a problem and whatever. And so later, not for any wrong reason or trying to be accusatory, I just chatted with the dad and I said, I saw you drop the kids off. It was Sunday school time. I saw you drop the kids off for Sunday school and then you and your wife pulled out. Is something wrong? You guys okay? And he said, oh, we do that pretty often. He said, we drop the kids off for Sunday school and then we go out to breakfast and then we come back for church. Really? Really? What kind of a testimony is that? I couldn't believe it. I don't remember what I said, but as I think about it now, I can't even imagine what I said. I can imagine what I thought. Like, what kind of a message are you sending to your children? Okay, kids, get out. You go into Sunday school. We're going out to breakfast. Catch up with you later. Are you kidding me? Abraham commanded his children and his household after him. He said, I want you to live the way I live. Now listen to the continuing testimony of God about Abraham's children. And again, I remind you, no perfect parents, no perfect children. We know that. But listen to what God said about Abraham's children. He said this, I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord. I want you to think about that. The way of the Lord. What is that? Well, that's the teachings of the Word of God. That's living the way God says we ought to live. There is a way of living. There is a way of having a testimony that is honoring to the Lord, the way of the Lord. This is how we act. This is how we talk. This is how we live. We are following the way of the Lord. Well, that's what we want for our children. But listen, there's more to this statement than the fact that they lived the way of the Lord. It says this, they shall keep the way of the Lord. I want my children to do that. I've said that all along. My children, of course, now grown up. My grandchildren are for the most part grown up. But this is what I want for all of them. They shall keep the way of the Lord. That term keep means to protect, to guard. You see, the way of the Lord is under attack today, maybe more than ever before. People walking away from God, walking away from the Bible, still professing to be Christians, but they don't live like it. And the way of the Lord, Christian standards and values, living by the Word of God, that is under attack today. That is being undermined in the name of Christianity. Well, I want to tell you something. I want children and now grandchildren who will stand up and not only live the way of the Lord, I want them to protect it, to defend it, to define it. That's what we as parents should want in the godly seed that we are bringing up in our homes. I love that. They shall keep the way of the Lord. And then it goes on and says this, to do judgment and justice. To do judgment and justice. The children, the household of Abraham, God says, would do judgment and justice. I suggest to you there's not much judgment today. There's not much good judgment today. Judgment speaks of discernment and understanding. Where's the discernment today? Where's the understanding of what is right and wrong, good and bad, godly, ungodly, moral, immoral? Where is the judgment? Well, I want to tell you, it's lost on many. God said of Abraham, listen, when his children grow up, they will defend and protect the way of the Lord, and they will be able to exercise judgment and discernment. There's a lot of people who know what way is right to live, but they don't know why. They can't explain it. They can't defend it. They don't have any discernment when they're trying to evaluate, is this good, bad? Wow, what a testimony for Abraham's children. And then it says they would also do justice. Justice is righteousness. Justice is doing what is right before God. Now again, was Abraham a perfect father? Not by a long shot. To be sure, he was not a perfect father, but there was something about the way he lived, the way he conducted his life, and the way he parented, the way he worked with his children, and so on, that God would give an incredible commendation to this man, and therefore was willing to entrust Abraham with information about Sodom and Gomorrah that he perhaps would not have shared with others. Well, that verse started, I know him. God knows you. God knows me. That should be challenging for us to think about. Yeah, God knows. Other people may not know, but God knows. Parenting, extremely serious business. I am responsible. I accept that responsibility. And I'll guarantee you, no perfect parent here, no perfect children born to me or raised under my care. But I accept that responsibility. Ephesians 6:4. Now we jump to another New Testament passage. And here's just an exhortation for fathers. It's not a testimony of what one did or did not do, as was with David and Adonijah and Abraham and his children, but an exhortation to fathers. In one of our episodes, we're going to focus on fathers. But listen to this, Ephesians 6, verse 4. And ye fathers, Paul said, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Now, is there responsibility there for a dad? Boy, I'll tell you it is. Provoke not your children to wrath. Be careful, Dad, how you treat your children, because if you treat them in such a way that they end up angry in life, they end up saying, my dad wasn't fair, my dad wasn't honest, my dad wasn't spiritual, he didn't treat us right, and I'm angry at my dad, and I'm bitter at my dad. Listen, we can't let that happen. And so what does Paul say? Hey, you fathers, don't provoke your children to wrath. You better be careful how you handle them and how you treat them. Instead of that, Paul said, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Bring them up, teaching them, ministering to them, putting into their minds, building into their life the things of God, the ways of God. I am responsible. I hope parents will get serious about that. I am responsible. Lord bless you. Till next time.